Hey guys, welcome to the Eerie Side Podcast with your host Dee,
Sophia,
and Elena.
We appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you are ready to get on the eerie side. Before we get into the show, we would appreciate if you could give the podcast a follow and make sure the bell notification is turned on so you will be notified whenever we drop an episode. If you enjoy the show, we would love to have you leave us a review, and if there's a case suggestion or any feedback you'd like to share, feel free to send us a message in the text box below. Share the podcast with family, friends, coworkers, and really anyone you think will enjoy it. Please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I have a story today about Lisa Oh, who was 19 years old and was living in Oahu, Hawaii in 1982. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she was excited for her future. She had just gotten her driver's license on January 18th of 1982, and then a few days later, she vanished. Lisa Oh was born on July 25th of 1962 to parents Chester, Dennis Oh, and Patrice. Lisa had a rich cultural heritage from each of her parents, Chinese on her father's side and Hawaiian on her mother's. She had long wavy black hair and worked as a hairdresser. According to everyone, her roommate, family, friends, she was hardworking, responsible, conscientious, and a careful person. On January 20, 1982, Lisa was working at the Susan Beer Salon in Kailua, a small town on the windward side of the Oahu Island in Hawaii. When she was finished working, it was pouring on in Oahu, flooding rains actually that night. She was procrastinating leaving the building, hoping to wait out the downpour. Eventually, she headed out the door in the bad weather. She told her coworkers she was going to go see her boyfriend, Doug Holmes, at his sister's apartment in Makiki, which was 30 minutes away. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary when speaking with Lisa that night. She was just as steadfast and friendly as always. On her way to the visit, she stopped to buy poke for the occasion. She got to the apartment, and the three of them spent the evening together. At around 12:45 a.m., Lisa and Doug left the apartment and went downstairs where they were both parked, and they said goodnight to each other. Doug claims that was the last time he saw her. Lisa had also called her roommate to tell her she was on her way home. Her roommate went to bed knowing that it would take Lisa at least 30 minutes to come home. When her roommate woke up, Lisa wasn't there. She wasn't too concerned because she thought maybe she didn't come home because of the rain and her being a new driver. She worked with Lisa at the same salon and thought she would see her there. Her roommate gets to work and Lisa doesn't show up. So her roommate calls her parents to tell them that she hasn't seen Lisa. She was hoping that maybe she had gone to someone's home that night due to the weather. However, she never arrived to her parents' house that night or any other family members. Worried, Lisa's parents called Doug the next morning at his University of Hawaii dorm. He told them that he didn't know anything about where Lisa was. He also told them that he would go out looking for her, because Doug was afraid that she may have gotten into a traffic accident since it had been storming the previous evening. Well, he found Lisa's car. When he did, Doug called police to report he'd found her car. A 1976 Toyota was parked on the shoulder of Highway Maunawili near the old Kailua Drive-In. The officer who arrived noticed that the window was down about 2-3 inches and the rain had come into the car and soaked it. The driver's seat was drenched. The officer expressed concern that her purse may have been placed on the seat after the torrential rain had stopped. On the wet seat lay Lisa's purse, which was dry, the policeman said. While Lisa's keys and wallet were inside the purse, her license and her vehicle registration were both missing. He also reported seeing scratches on Doug's face. Crime scene technicians would later determine that Lisa's car had been wiped clean of any evidence.
Where exactly was Lisa's car in relation to Doug's apartment and her own apartment?
Her car was farther away from Doug's apartment. She was somewhere in between getting home. I don't remember how many minutes, but she was 30 minutes away, like from Doug's more or less apartment. Doug's apartment was close to his sister's apartment.
Did it seem like she was on the way home, or no, it was just somewhere in between Doug's and her apartment?
It did look like she was on her way home.
And you said she was at Doug's apartment. Well, there were three people: herself, Doug, and who was the third person?
Doug's sister. They went to Doug's sister's apartment for the evening.
Okay.
That was one of the first indications that something bad may have happened to her. If she had car trouble and got a ride with someone, why would she have left her purse? And why was her purse dry, but everything else was soaked wet from the rain that night? Her father said that he just bought her the 1976 Toyota, which he had out, and it was all right. It didn't appear to be in need of repair. Word quickly spread of Lisa's disappearance, and thousands of flyers were distributed island-wide as her friends and family hoped against hope that she would be found alive. In interviews with the media, Lisa's family struggled to thank the hundreds of volunteers searching for their daughter. "Thank you is not enough," said her exhausted mother, holding back tears. "Everybody wanted to help so much. The support has just been great." The search would go on for 10 grueling days. On January 31st of 1982, a jogger with his dog stumbled upon Lisa's nude body in a ravine off Tantalus Drive in Makiki. She was found about 40 feet down an embankment, and witnesses at the scene claimed she was face down in tall grass as if she had been dumped from the side of the road. It was impossible to get fingerprints from her body, and that they ultimately had to use dental records. Local reports also stated that Lisa's high school ring, which had her initials engraved in it, was on her hand when she was discovered, was crucial for her identification. Her body was decomposed to the point where it was not possible to identify the cause of death, so to this day they don't know how Lisa died. Several theories have emerged that she was on her way home when she was stopped and abducted from the Kailua location, or that she was killed elsewhere and the vehicle was staged in Kailua to make it look like that's where she was stopped. Days after Lisa's body was found, homicide detectives had to figure out who was a suspect. One suspect was one of their own. The reason for this was a witness later recalled seeing a vehicle behind Lisa and following her, and that vehicle had blue flashing lights on the grille, leading to the speculation she had been stopped by a police officer or someone posing as one. Unfortunately, their theory became public, causing an island-wide panic. Women feared that a policeman was pulling over women to attack them. Now, here is why the police thought that either a policeman or someone posing as one may have been involved in Lisa's murder. Lisa's license was missing from her purse, and her car window rolled down halfway. In their minds, it meant she was pulled over and passed the license to the officer and even her car registration.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's it. It's set up just like that.
And both of those form of identification are missing.
Interesting.
After the suspected officer name leaked out, another woman from the windward side claimed he had pulled her over and that he'd used blue lights on his unmarked car. The woman had a sex harassment complaint against him because of what had occurred during a police ride-along. Another reason the police focused on this policeman was that he also lived near Lisa's home. Police lights like these were eventually taken off police cars in the wake of Lisa's case. The department even sought to reassure women that they didn't have to stop for unmarked police cars and eventually the Hawaii Police Department banned flashing lights on car grills altogether.
On car grills?
Right.
Like the front of the cars?
They were hidden. You know how unmarked cars? That's what they were talking about because they were
Oh.
unmarked cars.
So they couldn't be hidden, basically.
They didn't allow that anymore.
That's smart.
After Lisa's murder, they received a rash of reports by women claiming they were stopped by men posing as police officers by flashing blue lights otherwise hidden behind their car grills. In the meantime, investigators continued their focus on the police officer. The mass panic over police officers may have pushed the department to continue with their investigation into one officer and even convene a grand jury based on their evidence. But prosecutors were unable to secure an indictment because of the lack of evidence. One detective who worked the case said that the grand jury proceeding was a waste of time, and he contends the push to go after a police officer was all due to the intense public pressure for an arrest. When the grand jury failed to indict the officer, the detective said it tainted the case, exposed mistakes that detectives had made, and that discouraged other prosecutors from trying again. He argued that a shoddy investigation closed the door on evidence against others. This detective found evidence that seemed to debunk the killer cop theory. They had formulated premature conclusions, and he added that they had jumped on any clue that pointed to the police officer's involvement. Remember Lisa's missing driver's license? Its absence was an important clue that a police officer stopped Lisa that night. This detective, though, found it months later when he was retracing Lisa's movements. It turns out, after she left the hair salon, which was around 9:45 p.m., and stopped to buy poke, she showed her ID to write a check and forgot it at the store.
Oh, okay. So that's what happened to it.
But what about her vehicle registration?
Nothing comes up on that. Maybe she had that with her, and when she left her driver's license, maybe it was stuck in whatever. I do not know. I looked at a lot of articles and no one talks about the vehicle registration.
Well, even so, a cop still could have stopped her that night and asked for her driver's license and vehicle registration, and she just may not have had the driver's license at least.
Correct, but they did find the driver's license.
And that does weaken the policeman theory, I will say.
Correct.
I'd agree.
After the detective found this discovery, the ID was turned over to the police. He said that he knew then that Lisa was not pulled over by an officer. To this day, many still believe it was a police officer who killed Lisa. By 1985, 3 years after Lisa's death, the lead detective on the case was Nelson Loom. He wrote in a sworn statement that his massive and extensive investigation into Lisa's death had produced no evidence against a city employee acting within the course of their employment. In other words, a police officer didn't kill Lisa. The admission showed that the Hawaii Police Department lead suspect in the case for years was an innocent man. Loom also said there was actually no direct evidence as to who caused the death of Lisa, but he said that there were one or more suspects in the case. Now let's look at Doug. He denied he had anything to do with Lisa's death. Doug told police he said goodnight to Lisa in her car and did not actually see her drive away. This detective, who's been finding all this stuff, also found a security guard at the Makiki apartment building where Doug's Holmes sister lived and where Lisa was last seen alive. He told the police he saw the couple arguing about 11 p.m. The guard reported that Doug then drove off after Lisa left. Doug told the police he had gone back to his University of Hawaii dorm room. In a recorded interview, Doug acknowledged that he knew he was one of the suspects. Court documents show Doug even agreed to 2 lie detector tests, and he failed them both.
What? Really?
Correct.
Huh.
He had an explanation, though, that he felt guilty for not driving Lisa home in the heavy rain because she was an inexperienced driver. And in a sworn statement, Loom said that the explanation was good enough for him And he didn't have any other reason to suspect Doug. Why didn't he suspect Doug? Because he didn't think Doug had any motive to kill Lisa. Holmes said that there was no third-party involvement, which ruled out jealousy, which means no one was having an affair. That there was no money involved. There was no baby coming. There were no reason for him to do it. But Holmes said Doug admitted he was trying to end the relationship, saying he was going to college, being educated, while Lisa was more or less staying still education-wise.
Who said that? Doug said that.
Doug said that about Lisa.
Doug said that he said that about him. Well, if he says that he's going to break up with her, then why does he need to murder her?
I have no idea. But do remember he did have scratches on his face.
That is
Yeah,
very
that
suspicious.
is true.
So I do not know what that means.
And he was able to find her car when no one else was. They weren't really looking.
He
but-
just retraced how she would have gone home from his sister's house. At least that is what he is saying.
Okay.
Was it common knowledge at that point that there were policemen or somebody who appeared like policemen who were pulling women over?
Nothing was known to the public. There was a few women, I think, who had complained, but nothing was known to the public until Lisa's disappearance. And then the whole island knew about it.
Definitely, if she lost her driver's license, potentially her vehicle registration, that could make it seem like there was police involvement and potentially there wasn't.
Well, the policeman that they talked about hadn't killed anyone. He just stopped them and acted maybe inappropriately. So I do not know. Meanwhile, if you guys want to know what Doug is up to, he's living in Australia. According to his LinkedIn page, he's attended UH, which is the University of Hawaii, and then a college in Melbourne where he remains. He's an executive with an investment firm. In 2019, he said Lisa and her memory deserve justice, and it's good to hear that the Hawaii Police Department now has a cold case squad.
I don't know what I think about that or how I feel.
Yeah, that's...
Well, he cannot be touched. He is in Australia.
Say Hawaii would say, okay, we went to arrest him. We have a warrant out for his arrest. Would Australia expedite him back to the U.S. or no?
Actually, I'm not sure. They may and they may not. He probably is a citizen of Australia at this point.
Yeah, I think certain countries have different rules in their expedite process.
That is correct. Now, there is another witness, Charlotte Kamaka. She was a newspaper delivery driver. She later testified before the grand jury about what she saw on Tantalus in the hours after Lisa went missing. She said she was on her regular route around 2:30 a.m. In the police record, she said a man drove past her in a blue car with a female passenger who appeared to be asleep or unconscious. What alerted me was her head fell, she said. When the car made a turn, her head just fell. The way this person was sitting next to the gentleman who was driving was unusual to her when her head just fell.
Right. It's like she's a dummy almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Later, she said she got a good look at the driver as she turned around in a paved lookout. She said when the car made the turn, he just stopped and stared at her. After Lisa's body was found in the same area 10 days later, Kamaka went to the police station to report what she saw. She said the detective wrote down information on how to contact her, but she was never called back. She kept contacting the police anyways to see what they were doing. Her questions went nowhere. Well, they probably didn't go anywhere because they thought it was the policeman.
And what color car did Doug have?
I wish I knew. I wondered that too.
I feel like there's a lot of evidence that should have been easily findable. I don't know if that's a word.
I don't think they were putting the pieces together because I think they were stuck on that policeman.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting that the police would be stuck on the policeman theory because
That's one of their own.
I wouldn't have been surprised if they had overlooked that. So that is interesting. They were so focused on it.
You will see how focused they were. One key clue in the case with Lisa's car, which broke down in Maunawili near a mudslide that happened during those torrential rains. Officer Michael Refet was directing traffic and says he didn't remember seeing Lisa's Toyota. But months later, he was asked to tell the grand jury that he did and report that he saw the patrol officer at the car. Refet said he refused to lie and never testified.
Wow. That's crazy that they would go so far as having someone lie for this like policeman theory.
Yes, they were really stuck with that. More than a year after Lisa was killed, her body was exhumed. By the time Lisa's body was exhumed, it was believed that Honolulu coroner did not do a thorough job on the first autopsy. They were right. When the body was exhumed, investigators learned her remains were still in the police body bag.
Wow.
He was also appalled to learn that there were still leaves and dirt and rubbish inside. The body was never even washed. The medical examiner was pretty red-faced and embarrassed when all the details were revealed. A second opinion was sought by the Los Angeles coroner, who took a look at the skull and jawbone. The result of the exam was never made public, but the coroner did say that advanced decomposition meant making any conclusions would be very difficult. Forensic anthropologist Robert Mann of the University of Hawaii said a human skull can provide so many clues, but a less experienced examiner could easily miss the signs. There's so much that you can tell from the skull that you can't tell from the neck down, said Mann. If you miss that one little mark, that one little indicator of possibly cause of death, you're going to go, we don't have any evidence of what that person died of, but it's there, so you have to be very careful. Mann of the University of Hawaii said he'd be willing to take another look. That is, if he could access it. The problem? There is some dispute about where the skull and jawbone are now. The Honolulu Police Department says they're in the hands of the medical examiner officer, but the medical examiner says they will return to the casket with the rest of the remains. Lisa's family wonders if the items were indeed returned. The only way to be sure would be to disturb her grave again. Despite the painful process, Lisa's family will be asking the Hawaiian Police Department to do it again and re-examine her remains. They want to know if time, technology, and better skilled forensic anthropologists can finally determine how she died. To this day, there have been no arrests in connection with Lisa's murder, and her parents both have died without knowing what happened to their daughter.
I was wondering when I first heard about the body whether it was really examined to the fullest, and I'm not surprised that the second time it was examined that they kept some information to themselves, and I think that's probably a good thing, and I hope that means they know something so that if there ever is somebody, a suspect, a person of interest, making a claim, they can back check it up with the evidence that they have.
I definitely think that's possibly a good sign. I think we'll just have to wait and see, especially with this next attempt to search for new evidence, hopefully that they can find stuff that they've missed in the past. It's just crazy to me to see how someone could just bury her in such a disrespectful way is very hurtful for her and for her family. And just to not have that respect was also just really sad to hear.
I actually couldn't understand since this was a murder case.
Mm-hmm.
I know she was really decomposed badly. However, I would have hoped they'd have done an autopsy as best as they could. And it didn't even seem they did it when her body was still in the body bag they picked her up, and it was dirty with debris, which means they never did a thorough autopsy. Yes, she was degraded, but they should have been able to find something, I would have hoped.
Right. And especially given the fact that this is a murder case, you have to make sure you preserve the body, right? In case you ever have to go and look in the future. That's just common sense to bury it in a preserved way.
I had a feeling this had happened, and from the moment you told me about the body, there was just something in my mind that I immediately thought, okay, they did not do a proper job in examining the body. And maybe it's because it had been 10 days, yet they did not know how she died. And I understand they may not understand how she died, but there was no other evidence that they presented to say, okay, we don't know how she died, but this is what we did find with the body. And to me, it just felt a little bit lacking.
The thing is, if you do an autopsy, you can tell if she was killed within, those hours because, there would be bugs around her and, what stages of the bugs are. I know it's 10 days, but
Right.
some of the bugs go fast. They lay their eggs and they come out and all that. So, I know in Hawaii the weather goes fast, but they didn't seem to even do that because I think it sounds to me they just assumed that she died within so many hours and thrown. But they didn't even do a presentation of they found so many bugs or so many cases of their bugs around her that they could figure out that she had died. I just don't understand. It was just kind of an afterthought about her.
My question is, why do you think that they treated this case like this, Mom? Because I was wondering, do you think it was just they didn't know the correct things to do? They didn't care? They thought this was an open and shut case? I'm just curious what your opinion is.
Reading through it and listening to people talk, I think the police thought that it was an open and shut case. I think by the time they found her, maybe they were assuming it was a police officer, or they've heard something, or when the witness said they saw a police officer following her. So I think that's where it went right away instead of really researching everything and finding out. If this police officer's on their force, they can watch him. They don't even have to let him be in a unmarked car. They can just put him somewhere and trust him to another department or have him do an office job or something until they can solve it. So it just seemed they just went one way and that was it. And I just think they did a disservice to Lisa and her family.
Definitely. It just is unfair what they did to her and her family.
The entire time they handled this case, it just feels like it's an afterthought, the way they handled the entire case. And I think if they had maybe handled it differently, we would have a better sense of the direction as to what happened to her. And now I feel like if we want to solve this case, I don't know if there's any DNA or not, or any actual evidence, but if there isn't, I think it's going to take some sort of confession to get this rolling in the right direction.
Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be able to solve it, to be honest with you, because they didn't take samples or anything. Look at how they found the body. The other thing is, did they ask questions? Did she have someone following her? Did someone come to her work and seem to make her feel uncomfortable? There were no such things asked because no one talks about it. No one at the salon talks about it, her friend, her roommates, nobody. So it doesn't seem like they took the questioning any further. The detective that did a lot of research, I think he feels that Doug played a role without saying it. But to reality, you can't even solve that right now.
But where did Doug get the scratches in his face? Did he ever say?
No one asked him.
Even till this day?
What happened was the policeman put it down that he noticed them. I'm not sure he asked him. It's nowhere written that he asked him. And then it never comes up, where did you get these scratches? And he failed the lie detector test twice. Did he fail on every question? Did he fail just on about Lisa? And I have no idea.
To me, it says a lot that he had scratches on his face. And of course, we know that lie detectors cannot be relied upon 100%.
Right.
I wonder when she called her friend, I wonder if her friend thought anything sounded odd or if it all sounded normal. Because it's interesting. She was on her way home. She should have been there in 30 minutes. So what happened if it's potentially, allegedly Doug? What would have happened to her thinking she's on her way home to her having her life taken away?
I don't know. I know her roommate didn't think anything of it, that she said she'd be there, so she wasn't concerned. That's why she went to bed. She wasn't concerned, even though Lisa was a new driver. I think had faith that she'd make it, because everybody's saying, oh, she was a new driver, it's raining. Well, new drivers drive in the rain. That's how they learn. You just can't say, I'm not going to drive. The thing is, did anyone follow up? Did Doug go to his dorm? Did anyone say, yeah, I saw him coming? Maybe there weren't cameras back then, but something. I'm not even sure anyone followed up on Doug.
Yeah.
Except for that officer who found at least the guard who said, well, they were arguing because Doug acted like nothing was wrong that night.
Where were they arguing that they noticed?
When they had come down around 11 for some reason, even though they didn't leave till about 12:40 a.m., But like around 11 p.m., Doug and Lisa were downstairs, and the guard, I think they were downstairs or somewhere around the apartments. He saw them arguing.
And they were arguing at around 11, but they left at like 12:40.
12:45 a.m. they left, yes.
And where was Doug supposedly going to go?
Doug was going to go to his dorm at the University of Hawaii, and she was headed home.
Do we know at all if Lisa was pregnant or not?
All I know was no.
Did they even check? Can we even trust their...
Well, they didn't even do an autopsy, so how do I
she
know?
could have been pregnant for all we know.
Maybe. I mean, I have no way of knowing that.
And so, which would have been very relevant to the investigation.
That would have been relevant, but Detective Loom said no pregnancy. So how would he know now is the question. Let's just say, okay, if they never did a real thorough autopsy, considering she was in the bag, she was dirty with leaves. They didn't even clean her, which means they really didn't do much of an autopsy.
Here's the thing. If a boyfriend supposedly or allegedly may want to kill her, you'd have to think why, especially if it's not an in the moment heat of the passion kill.
Right,
which
because
it doesn't seem like it was.
She left before him, so wouldn't he have to wait for her to leave and then go after her and then somehow catch up with her separately?
Yes, maybe he knew she was driving slowly. Maybe he just was more comfortable driving in the rain, went faster. I don't know.
I guess that's what the people who believe Doug had a part of this believe, right? That she left before him.
According to the guard, she left and then Doug left right after that. That's all the guard says.
Okay.
It could have been just a few minutes. He knew the way she was going home because he found her.
There was no sign of crash or anything, right?
No.
So
the car, other than the window being open, the car looked okay. That's why they thought at first that maybe the car had broken down, but there was nothing wrong with the car.
So how do people think that he got her to stop? Like just somehow was just like flashing his lights or something?
Well, that's why they thought the policeman did it. But actually, Doug and a policeman would probably make her stop quicker than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
Who would make her stop?
I think a police officer, but her boyfriend too. Or if you see him flashing his lights or you see him go in front of your car and beep the horn, you'd be like, hey, that's my boyfriend. What's going on? Maybe I should stop and see what's going on.
He could have pulled up next to her, and then that's why she put her window down. And then he was like, I got to tell you something. Get out of the car.
But her car was wiped down. So someone spent time wiping her car down. It could have been a predator. They said there was a predator in Hawaii later on, but if this individual was just starting out and trying, they said maybe it was him. However, there isn't much information that they think it is him, okay? But let's just say someone spent time. I'm not sure predator would have spent time taking her and then going and cleaning the car and then putting her purse back.
Yeah.
Doug could have put her purse back because he was the one who found the car.
Yeah, it seems more personal.
Did they check to see what time Doug returned to his dorm?
I have no information on that. If they did, maybe they're not saying.
I don't know when he left after this, but that it is interesting that he left the country at some point.
I want to thank you for listening to us this week. We love our listeners, and because of you, we do this podcast. Your help and engagement really helps the podcast grow. If you enjoyed this episode, please text a friend and family member to listen to our podcast. Until next time, make sure you stay on the eerie side. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Be safe.